Hey, church family. Today we're in John chapter 15 in our New Testament challenge. And if you're like us at our home, we've been in quarantine for a long time. And so I decided today would be fun just to let the kids do something a little different and be a part of our devotion for today. And in John chapter 15, you see I've got a bowl of grapes right here in front of us today. And that's because John chapter 15 is Jesus talking about himself being like the true vine, as he calls himself, right there in verse number 1. I am the true vine. And he talks about us remaining in him. We're going to get to that. But, before I got into full-time ministry, I was working for an advertising company, a small business. And one day, playing golf with the owner and his wife, she looked at me and said, my pastor talked about you Sunday at our church. And we didn't go to the same church. And I was kind of, surprised by that. Okay, what do you mean exactly? And she said he talked about knowing someone by their fruit. Well, you know what? It kind of humbled me, honestly. I thought there are so many times that maybe my fruit is not evident. But in that moment, it did tell me that people are always watching. They're always watching us to see if we're bearing fruit. And that's what Jesus is talking about right here. And he's going to give us some ideas of what it means to be connected to him. He's going to tell us how to bear fruit. He's going to tell us why we bear fruit. And so I want us just to look in here a little bit and see what he tells us. He uses this word, in the NIV, he uses the word remain. That's kind of a weird word. He says remain in me quite often. He even says, and I'll remain in you. And that's not a word necessarily we use all the time, but it really means to stay connected to abide with, to be in constant communication, right? To be with him. And if I had a vine, which I do not, I don't have a vine. We don't really have vines growing in our yard. But if I had a vine and I was to just break off the branch, what he tells us is, he says, if you take off the branch can basically do nothing apart from the vine. And so the branch cannot produce any fruit like this awesome grape right here, right? And so he's saying you have to remain in me in order to bear fruit. And what is he talking about anyway with fruit, guys? So when he talks about fruit, we know in Galatians that the fruit of the Spirit are, you guys know it, say it.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Very nice. It was almost like we had rehearsed that. That was really good, right? And so he's saying he wants us to bear fruit. How do we bear fruit? It's simple. Stay connected to him, right? The nutrition we find, that a branch finds in the vine to produce fruit, the same way with us in our walk with Christ. Stay connected with him. Why do we bear fruit? Well, there's a few ways he tells us in this passage. Why is he concerned about us bearing fruit? One of them is this. If it's to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit. This is verse 8, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So ultimately, when my boss's wife said that to me years ago, again, it made me feel pretty good, right? It humbled me a little bit, but ultimately, it just reminded me, this is for God's glory that I am bearing fruit, right? That our lives should bear fruit for the glory of God. Here's another one. I'm going to let Elle read this. It's verse 11. He says, go ahead and read out verse 11 for us.
I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete.
Wow. So he's telling us about how to remain in him and in his love, and that ultimately we get complete joy, right? Joy that is lacking nothing. Another way that he tells us why we bear fruit, I'm going to let Rylan read this one. This is verse 16. Go ahead, Rylan.
You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, love each other.
That's right. There's a couple times in this passage that he mentions when we bear fruit and we call on the Lord and ask him for something, that he will give it to us. You know why? It's because when we're bearing fruit, we're in him. Our will aligns with his will. And so the things we ask God for, he's going to grant them because they were in his will. All right? And ultimately, this whole passage boils down to this. Rylan just read it. This is my command. Love each other. When we remain in Christ, we're going to have love for one another. And our fruit is going to be evident. And so, you know what, today, church, we just want to challenge you. Hey, where is a way in your life today that you can show the fruit that you have in Jesus? And if you're struggling, maybe it's been a little while, you're just struggling, remaining in Him, set aside time to spend time with Him daily that you may gain from the true vine, right? We're going to eat one of these grapes. Maybe you've got one at home. You can eat it. It'll be a reminder. And by the way, these are not cotton candy grapes. But if you have a chance, that's a real thing, right? That's one of our favorite things, cotton candy grapes. Go to Publix. I don't know where else they have them. Probably other places. They taste like cotton candy, but they're nutritious. I promise you're going to love them. Hey, take a grape. Remain in Jesus today.